Hey guys, Pete here. This will be my Better Call Saul Season 5 Episode 7 recap and review. I feel like a broken record, but as a fan I have to call them like I see them, and this was another great episode. The thing that's always impressed me about Better Call Saul is how they've been able to take a story that we basically know the end of, and take us on a journey that we couldn't have expected. When I first heard they would be making a prequel show about Walter White's lawyer, who more or less felt like comic relief, it was hard to imagine how they could cook up anything that might be as gripping as the original. Watching Jimmy deliver his lightning bolt shoot from my fingertips feels equal to Walter's "I'm the one who knocks" speech, and I feel that's really a surprise that I'm here for. Episode 7 is titled JMM, which is Jimmy's initials, James Morgan McGill. When Lalo asks him about them later, he uses the line he came up with when he was talking to Kim, "Justice matters most," and things fall perfectly into place when Lalo suggests instead just make money. For the Saul we knew in Breaking Bad, that would make perfect sense. But as we watch this episode unfold, we see there's still a lot of Jimmy McGill under the surface. Before we talk about that, I want to talk about Gus, because his part of the episode was better than usual, I would say, and it drove something home for me. I do a trailer breakdown each week, and in the comments of the last one, a lot of people jumped in saying they thought this shot of Gus was related to Madrigal Electromotive and a Lydia appearance. In my mind, I was like, yeah, that's probably the case, cool, but how is that really an important part of things based on everything else that's going on? Well, I'll tell you how. Bring back another Breaking Bad character, Peter Schuler, who had a memorable 5-minute arc in the teaser for episode 2 of season 5. Herr Schuler was the head of Madrigal's fast food division. We meet him as he dispassionately tastes new dipping sauces until he's interrupted by his assistant, who lets him know the police are in his office waiting for him. We watch this story come to an end in that same dispassionate manner, but here we get to see a different side of him. After a meeting at Madrigal's Houston office, we watch Gus go back to his hotel and witness an amazing little sequence where he settles in and he's getting ready for something. I loved watching here how he does everything so precisely, how it's all such a controlled situation. He goes to meet with Lydia and Peter in their adjoining room, and they ask him about this Lalo situation. Gus admits that even though Lalo's locked up, he's still a threat. Lydia suggests that maybe he should get stabbed, basically a prison shanking, which is another reference to an event we see happen in Breaking Bad. But Gus explains that he can't really do anything because if anything happens to Lalo on this side of the border, then the cartel will think he's behind it. The most interesting thing here is that Gus is able to calm him down by talking about what happened in Santiago. Of course, we want to know more about his history. We've heard Chile mentioned a couple of different times now, and I'm hoping that this means that we're going to get some real answers. As things stand, Gus has to burn down one of his own restaurants because he needs to protect Nacho, who he's got playing both sides. This involves a really great trigger device where he uses a whole frozen chicken. He turns on that same fryer that we saw Lyle laboring over in the other great Gus sequence of this season, and he leaves things set up so that it'll slide in and start the fire after he exits the building. It's pretty badass all the way around, watching him walk away as the thing goes up in flames. From there, let's go back and talk about Jimmy and Kim. At the end of the last episode, Kim had proposed this idea of marriage, and in this episode, they get right down to it. We see them having a conversation, talking about the details, and this is where it all makes sense. This is the same kind of situation where people have been saying the reason that she wanted to get married was to protect herself from having to testify against Saul in case he got in trouble. That in and of itself didn't sound like a very interesting reason. But as we see her explain that she just wants to know what he's doing, we actually see that it serves multiple purposes. Basically, what we see here is a mirroring of that situation where we saw them in the parking lot the next morning after throwing the beer bottles. Kim sees this as an opportunity to have an honest relationship. She says to Jimmy she doesn't want to be in the dark anymore. If he feels like he has the urge not to tell her what he's doing in his business, then that's a good time that he better tell her. And now that all makes sense, right? Because while it is a legal solution, it's also Kim's way of fixing this problem where she can't be taken by surprise. She can't be scammed by her partner if they're being fully transparent with each other. It's great how this all plays out because we see Jimmy telling Huell that it's just this technicality for legal reasons. So they go through the motions. We do learn that he has been divorced twice already. The woman at the counter asked for his paperwork on his previous 2 dissolutions. We knew one for sure, but there's always been this question of how he was married and divorced twice. It's led some people to thinking that Kim might have been his second wife in his second divorce. But as we watch this, through a fantastic performance by both Bob Odenkirk and Rhea Seehorn, we see that they're telling themselves one thing, but there's a lot of other stuff going on as well. The whole thing happens really fast. Kim has made the decision that this is a choice to protect herself, but as they take these awkward vows, we see that it becomes something more. It's not just a marriage of convenience, but this is something that they're entering into together. It was played really well, and it comes off, and I'm surprised at how much I could enjoy this based on the reason that they went into this idea. It's worth mentioning the pivotal role that Huell plays here, and that's all topped off with his taking the instant photo of them at the end. Of course, they both have busy days planned. Jimmy gets the call that he has to go meet his new client, Jorge de Guzman, who is actually Lalo. It's not a big surprise that the judge would deny bail, and Jimmy thinks that they should probably try to look at a deal. Lalo brings up this idea of does he want to be a friend of the cartel, which initially seems kind of irrelevant because there's no way that he could get him out of this. And with that, we leave it there. Kim heads over to Mesa Verde, trying to clean up the mess that Jimmy has caused with his Saul Goodman antics at the previous day's meeting. They make their case and Kevin doesn't seem moved. And on the way out, he makes a comment about Jimmy, which it was kind of hard to figure out where things were going to go from there. When she comes back in the room, I almost expected her to blow up about that, but instead she makes a pretty effective move in telling Kevin, you know what, it's your fault. We're your lawyers. We advised you to do the right thing. You chose to do your own thing, and this is where we ended up. In the end, that works because he tells them that they'll see them on Thursday, which means that he's willing to put the situation behind them. When the couple get back together at home, we see their non-honeymoon. Things get heated up. We almost get a sex scene. And then Jimmy has to stop things in order to tell her about what happened today and Lalo's offer of being a friend to the cartel. This is something that he's kept from her. And now he's doing what she wants. He's telling her honestly what's going on. And at this point, he's still able to say, it doesn't matter because I can't do it. I'm not going to be able to get this guy bail. And in a weird way, this is sort of like the actual consummation of their marriage. He's honest about something he doesn't want to be, and from there they can move on with him doing what she asked him to do. Nacho makes an appearance. We saw him get the call from Lalo, who told him that he wanted him to burn down one of the restaurants. He asked Mike for help. We learn that he put Nacho back in charge and that he wants out, but he can't do anything until he takes care of the situation with his father. Mike is doing better. We see him with Kaylee and Stacy. He tells Stacy that he's decided to play the cards that he's dealt, which explains to us how he got to where he's at. It wasn't so much that he sees something in Gus that he wants to move forward with, but he's decided to move ahead just the same because at least this way he has some control over what's going on. Gus, having found that Lalo being in jail is actually worse than him being out, sends Mike to give Jimmy the information he'll need to get Lalo out. Jimmy asks him who he's working for, which Mike doesn't want to tell him, and there's still a little bit of confusion about that because it doesn't seem like in the Breaking Bad timeline that Saul knows that much about what Mike does. Either way, the information that he gives him is enough for Jimmy, and this whole sequence in the courtroom is something to watch. The family of the victims are there, and Jimmy, you could see it that he's really having a hard time with this, but at the same time, he snaps right into form and says exactly what he needs to say to get this bail set up. It really shows both sides of him and how fluidly he moves back and forth. We see it play out to its conclusion outside the courtroom. We see Jimmy in this great shot where he's sneaking around the corner to look at the victim's family. We see half of him in the reflection, and it doesn't quite make the whole, you know? We know he doesn't feel good about what he just did, and then Howard comes up to be the catalyst for this breakdown that we see. We find out that Howard's going to pull the offer. He knows Jimmy threw the bowling balls. He knows about the prostitutes. Jimmy tries to deny it at first, but then he completely loses it when Howard says that he knows he's in pain. He fires back saying that Howard killed Chuck. You see this massive amount of projection coming from him. Everything that he can't face, he sees this guy in front of him, he puts it on him, and he just starts talking madness. He thinks that the job is beneath him. He has no idea what he's capable of. And it's also sad as much as it is exciting, because we know that Saul is this guy who drives around in a white Cadillac wearing ridiculous suits and operates out of a strip mall with an inflatable Statue of Liberty on top of his office. While he is good at doing the things he does, we can't imagine that that really satisfies him in the sense that he's talking about it here. He's got a massive inferiority complex. He must on some level realize that he has a big role in his brother's death. And we see that this hatred that he has for Howard is just a result of pushing all that stuff down, and wow. He says, "I travel in worlds you can't even imagine. You can't conceive of what I'm capable of. I'm so far beyond you. I'm like a god in human clothing. Lightning bolts shoot from my fingertips." And it's funny because if you've been following this show like I have, and you go in Reddit in different places, you know, there's always been these conversations about this is the moment when Jimmy becomes Saul. Obviously, we've learned over these last 5 seasons that isn't something that happens at one moment. But I think here we get a really good idea of where it all comes from, if nothing else. The contrasts are fascinating between how Jimmy deals with his stuff, Kim deals with her stuff, and we see Howard dealing with his. Kim's got this problem with the relationship, so she thinks of this solution. She's got this problem with Mesa Verde, so she faces it head on and she fixes it. Jimmy tries to end around everything, including his brother's death, and it explodes. And we see that Howard is actually dealing with that same thing on the other end and getting through it in a healthy fashion. And like I said, I think this is a great episode. It gives us deeper insight to Kim and what she's thinking, why she makes the decisions that she makes. The Gus stuff was interesting and added a little more depth to his story. And of course, here we are with Jimmy shouting at the courthouse, making a giant scene, thinking that he's got it all figured out. So yeah, this was a recurring theme in this episode for me as a fan. Things that I didn't think that would have that much impact turned out to be really good underlying reasons for the decisions that the characters made. As I said, I feel like a broken record saying it, but geez, what a good episode. But let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode, what you thought about the wedding between Jimmy and Kim. Where do you think things are heading? I know next episode is called Bagman, and Vince Gilligan will be directing that. He said it's one of the most difficult things he ever did. That's pretty exciting. I'll be doing a trailer breakdown in a couple of days, so make sure you check back for that. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you soon.